Greetings, cinema and AI lovers. Welcome to the new episode of Artifinema Cinetelligence. How are you? We want to inform you that this episode may contain spoiler.
Hi there. Yeah, today we're really digging into something, well, pretty unique. It's the 1984 made-for-TV film Overdrawn at the Memory Bank.
That's right. It's maybe not the first film you think of when you talk 80s sci-fi, but wow, does it pack a punch thematically?
It really does.
Yeah.
It might look a bit rough around the edges, but our sources show it's got these fascinating insights into AI, simulation, identity crises, all that good stuff.
So our mission today is pretty ambitious. We're not just going to recap the plot. We want to use this film, which, let's be honest, looks like it had a tiny budget.
Oh, yeah.
Use it as a lens, you
Yeah.
know, to see how those economic pressures, the creative ideas, and these classic sci-fi themes all smashed together.
Exactly. What does this movie, with its famously cheap sci-fi credits, actually tell us about technology and consciousness even today?
Okay, so before we get into the deep theory, we should probably cover the basics. The first 5 minutes or so, just give everyone the general picture.
Good idea. So, Overdrawn at the Memory Bank, originally shown on PBS, then some cable channels. It's actually based on a short story by John Varley.
Right, and that TV movie origin is really key, isn't it? It didn't have a big cinema release, no big marketing push.
Definitely not. But it sort of found this cult following over the years, partly just because it's so weird.
Huh, yeah. It was directed by Robert Young. He did a lot of British TV, documentaries, that kind of thing.
Which might explain why it sometimes looks a bit like the TV show trying to be a movie, you know? A very high concept idea, but maybe not the most cinematic execution visually.
And the reception reflects that. You look it up now, say, on IMDb or similar sites, and the ratings usually, what, like hovering around the middle?
Yeah, maybe a 5.5, 6 out of
Mhm.
10, something like that. And the comments often mention, the confusing plot, the dated look. It didn't set the world on fire critically at the time.
No box office numbers, obviously, being a TV movie. Right.
And the cast is interesting, too. Raul Julia plays the main character, Aram Fingal.
Great actor.
Fantastic actor. Nominated for a Golden Globe for this, believe it or not.
Mm.
But back then, he was maybe more known for stage and TV. He hadn't quite hit that wider movie fame yet.
His performance really holds it together, though. You can tell they're relying on the actors because maybe they couldn't afford huge sets or effects.
That contrast is exactly it, isn't it? The film talks about this super high-tech world, brain banks, implants, mind control tech.
They're visually. Well, the sources aren't kind. They call out the worst sci-fi special effects ever. And yeah, those opening credits, they do look pretty cheap.
Yeah, that opening just drops you right in. You're supposed to be in this advanced future, but everything looks a bit cardboardy. And the main character, Aram Fingal, whose name one source hilariously called the worst made-up name I've ever heard.
I saw that. It's pretty bad.
He's facing this ultimate corporate punishment.
And what's his crime? It's almost mundane, which makes it scarier. He got caught watching movies on their time. Like, imagine getting fired or worse for watching Casablanca during work hours.
It's such a sharp critique right off the bat. Corporate control over everything. So to avoid getting basically deleted, he has to undergo this radical procedure.
What brain transfer? Into the company's giant memory bank system, managed by someone called a psychist.
And the details they just casually throw out. Installing a skull plug.
Oh, God, yeah. Taking the top of someone's skull off without any blood whatsoever. It's presented so clinically, so bureaucratically.
It's chilling. Like medical horror disguised as paperwork. A perfect example of the system's dehumanizing nature, even if the effects budget couldn't show it spectacularly.
And that brings us right to the AI and the look of the film. Why does it look so budget constrained while still feeling kind of dreadful?
Well, the answer really lies in the Canadian film industry back in the 80s. That cheap sci-fi look wasn't just like a lack of talent or vision. It was a symptom of a huge economic battle.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because you can't really get the film without understanding the context it was made in. We're talking post-70s Canada.
Right. The big tax credit boom was over. Canadian producers were suddenly going head-to-head with Hollywood, this absolute giant.
And the Canadian market itself just wasn't big enough to pay for expensive TV shows or movies.
Nowhere near. Research from that time, especially around companies like Atlantis Films and RSL Films, the ones that later became Alliance Atlantis, it shows this massive funding gap. Canadian broadcasters could maybe cover only like 15% of the production costs from domestic screenings.
15% compared to the US or UK, where producers could often get 80 or even 100% back just from their home market.
Exactly. So Canadian companies had this huge, like 75% hole they needed to fill. It forced them into a really risky strategy.
Which was?
They basically had to make content aimed squarely at foreign markets, especially the US.
Ah, okay. So forget making distinctly Canadian stories.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
It led to what the sources call industrial dramas. Shows designed to be generic, deliberately scrubbed clean of anything too Canadian.
They wanted them to be almost interchangeable with American shows.
Right, to maximize their chances of selling abroad and making back their costs. So, the need for money directly shaped the kind of stories being told, or rather, not told.
So the economics dictated the aesthetics. Make it bland, make it generic so it sells internationally. Cultural anonymity as the survival strategy.
It's deeply ironic, isn't it? A film warning about fake simulated realities was itself produced under pressure to create a kind of simulated, generic cultural product.
Wow. Yeah.
Now, Overdrawn is maybe a bit of an exception because sci-fi can sometimes get away with being weird.
Sure.
But those budget limitations, the look of it, that's partly the fallout from this bigger industry struggle. The special effects budget was basically a casualty in the fight for market share against Hollywood.
That framework, the economic reality forcing a kind of cultural simulation, is actually a perfect lead-in to the film's ideas about AI and sci-fi concepts.
Absolutely. Because if the visuals are constrained, the concepts have to do the heavy lifting.
Which brings us to the novum.
Yes. The conceptual engine of the film.
Okay, let's pause here. This is a key term from sci-fi theory. For listeners maybe hearing it for the first time, what exactly is the novum?
So the novum, this comes from the critic Darko Suvin. It's that central piece of newness, usually technological or scientific, that makes a story science fiction instead of, say, fantasy.
It's the what if, the speculative element.
Exactly. But crucially, Suvin argued, it has to be cognitive, meaning it has to feel plausible within a rational scientific worldview. It can't just be magic.
So dragons,
Yeah.
fantasy, a warp drive based on theoretical physics. That's a novum, that's sci-fi.
You got it. And in Overdrawn at the Memory Bank, the main novum is that whole memory bank technology, the digital consciousness transfer, and the psychist who manages it.
That's the core speculative tag.
Right. And that technology is what allows the story to ask these huge philosophical questions about identity and reality.
And the point of having this novum, according to Suvin and others, is to create something called cognitive estrangement.
Another important term. It's drawn from Bertolt Brecht's theater ideas, verfremdung, the distancing effect.
Making the familiar strange.
Exactly. By showing us reality that's fundamentally different because of the novum, sci-fi makes us look at our own world, our own society, with fresh eyes. It forces a critical distance.
Brecht wanted audiences to think, not just feel.
Right. And Suvin saw that as the main value of SF, its ethico-political liberating qualities. It gives you this different perspective, this what-if, to critique the here and now.
And this film, even with its dodgy effects, does that right away. That whole setup with Aram getting busted for watching movies.
It immediately taps into that dystopian critique. The corporation controls leisure, controls thought. It's straight out of the playbook of
Huxley, Bradbury.
Yeah, Brave New World, Fahrenheit 451, controlling what people consume, how they spend their free time, as a way to control their minds.
So the AI question here becomes, is this memory bank tech, this consciousness transfer, a path to freedom, maybe immortality, or is it just the ultimate tool for corporate control?
And the fact that Aram's physical body can just be lost or misplaced after the transfer, well, that tells you something about how the system views individuals. Disposable.
Right. It suggests the system is flawed, maybe even corrupt.
This whole idea of simulated or false realities, it has such a strong connection to Philip K. Dick. He's like the patron saint of this kind of story.
Absolutely. Dick's work is obsessed with reality breaking down, often because of technology, corporations, or the government.
Think about Time Out of Joint. The main character, Roggelgum, he thinks he's living this normal 1950s life.
But his entire town is fake. A construct.
A massive, elaborate prop built by the military just to keep him calm and doing this one specific task they need him for. It's total simulation as a control mechanism.
That deep paranoia is my reality reel, is exactly what the memory bank taps into. It's supposed to be an escape for Aram, but it's still a controlled, contained environment.
And the sources link this to a broader critique of mass media. The idea that serving up easy lowest common denominator entertainment is a political weapon aimed at the pacification of the citizenry.
Keeping people docile and consuming. Whether it's Dick's fake worlds, Bradbury's wall-sized TV screens, or this corporate memory bank, it's about managing populations through media.
The AI here isn't just managing data, it's managing people. Social engineering on a massive scale.
Okay, this is where it gets really cool, I think. Because the look of the film, the cheapness, actually starts to work with this critique of fake reality. Let's talk aesthetics.
Yeah, let's connect the theory to the visuals. We can think about this through the idea of illusionist art.
Meaning,
Well, historically, creating realistic illusions, mimesis has been viewed differently. Like in the Renaissance, mastering perspective to create lifelike paintings was seen as amazing, celebrating man the maker.
art and tech mastering reality, the optimistic view.
Right. But there's also this counter-tradition, often rooted in religious thought, like Puritanism, that was deeply suspicious of realistic images. They saw them as lies, as corrupting illusions.
Like idols, basically, distracting you from truth.
Exactly. And that suspicion got transferred later onto mass media, photos, movies, TV, the idea that these powerful visual illusions could manipulate and degrade people.
So applying that to Overdrawn, the fact that the special effects aren't perfect, that the virtual world looks kind of flimsy.
It actually reinforces the critique. The shoddiness screams fake. The low budget unintentionally becomes a kind of moral statement against the counterfeit reality the corporation is offering.
It stops you from just getting lost in the illusion because the illusion keeps breaking.
Precisely. The visual failure supports the philosophical point. If this memory bank is supposed to be some digital paradise, the fact that it looks cheap and glitchy makes you question its value. It feels spiritually thin, just like Huxley's feelies or Bradbury's empty parlor families were meant to feel.
And that instability, the glitchiness of the simulation, allows for the really bizarre stuff to happen, the moments that really stick with you.
Oh yeah. Which leads us to the baboon.
We have to talk about Aram Fingal becoming Aram the baboon.
It's the peak of the film's conceptual craziness, but it's also central to its questions about consciousness.
I mean, it's absurd on the surface, transferring a human mind into a baboon.
Yep.
But it forces you to confront that mind-body problem in the most extreme way.
Right. It's not just a sleek robot body, it's an animal. His consciousness is totally ripped from its human container.
Okay.
So who is he now? Is identity purely mental? Does the body fundamentally shape the mind?
It goes way beyond the usual cyborg questions. It's an ontological crisis, like you said.
And the little details of his baboon existence are just perfectly weird. The sources highlight that one line. An elephant attacking a tree with a baboon in it is called for a code red.
It's so specific and yet so nonsensical. It sums up the whole film. Bureaucratic rules trying to contain absolute chaos.
The system's logic being applied to this utterly broken, surreal situation. It shows the simulation is failing, it can't maintain its own rules coherently.
Then there's that other image, turning computer disks into flowers.
Yeah. The cold, hard tech suddenly blooming into organic life. It's another moment of breakdown, but maybe something more.
How do we read that? Is it just a glitch, a system error?
Could be.
Yeah.
Or maybe it's a sign of human imagination or something pushing back against the machine. Kind of a romantic idea, like nature or spirit overwhelming cold logic. A moment of delineating human history, as one source puts it.
Like Wordsworth railing against the Parliament of Monsters. Yeah, imagination over crude reality.
Or, from inside the simulation's logic, it's just catastrophic failure. Reality itself is becoming unstable because the system can't hold it together.
Which leads to the ultimate breakdown, the most personal one.
Aram's dead mother showing up in the simulation to give him soup.
A ghost in the machine, literally. Something completely outside the system's parameters. Memory, emotion, maybe even spirit disappears.
The memory bank, this supposedly perfect digital construct, can't account for or control that deep human connection, that non-material element. It breaks the purely materialist reading of the simulation.
It definitely pushes it beyond just faulty programming into something more metaphysical.
By the way, if you liked and interested so far, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment. It's really important for us to continue this series.
Okay, so connecting back, let's revisit those real-world production pressures. We talked about the economic need driving Canadian producers. Let's detail how that actually helped build Toronto into Hollywood North.
Right, so this really tough environment where you had to get foreign money, it actually became a kind of intense training ground.
How so?
Well, to get deals with U.S. companies like PBS, HBO, CBS, Canadian producers had to meet their standards. So Canadian crews, writers, actors, directors, They all got experience working on these bigger, internationally focused projects.
Even to the projects themselves, or maybe those generic industrial dramas we mentioned.
Exactly. They were learning the craft, building the infrastructure. And then you had key successes like the Raymond Bradbury Theater from Atlantis Films in '85, right after Overdrawn.
Okay.
That was funded upfront by HBO with help from Telefilm Canada. Getting that HBO deal, airing on a major U.S. cable network, that set a new pattern. It showed it could be done.
A repeatable model. Secure the big U.S. partner first, then make the show. That plugs the funding gap.
Precisely. And that success, repeated over the mid-'80s, fueled massive growth in Toronto's film and TV industry. More studios, more crews, more post-production houses, leading eventually to that Hollywood North nickname.
So the irony holds. The push for cultural survival driven by Canadian content rules and funding agencies ended up creating an industry very good at making, well, often American-looking content.
Yeah, adopting the methods and aesthetics of the dominant market was the path to economic viability.
Yeah.
The cultural mission and the commercial reality were kind of in tension.
Thinking about that tension, let's tie it back to the film's AI themes again. This idea of shared versus isolated experience in these mediated realities, it feels relevant to the production context too.
How do you mean?
Well, making the film was a shared, collaborative effort by the Canadian crew, but the end product, the industrial drama, was often designed for individual consumption, maybe by anonymous viewers scattered globally.
That's a great point. It reminds me again of Philip K. Dick, specifically the three stigmata of Palmer Eldritch.
Okay, tell us about that connection.
In that book, you have colonists on Mars who were incredibly isolated. They used this drug, Candy, to mentally inhabit these miniature layouts and role-play glamorous lives as characters like Berkey Pat.
It's a shared virtual reality, basically, a way to escape their bleak existence together.
Right, it aims to create community through shared fantasy. But Dick shows it doesn't really work. The experience is shared, but the participants are still selfish, isolated, fighting for control within the fantasy. It's only a simulacrum of community.
The connection feels artificial because it's just escapism. It doesn't solve the underlying isolation.
Exactly. So the question becomes, both for Dick's characters and for Aram in the memory bank, does this immersive tech actually connect people? Or does it just create a really convincing shared hallucination?
Hey, listener, do you have any other idea or question about this? Please write in comments.
That question about authentic connection versus simulation really brings us to the final layers of Overdrawn at the memory bank. We need to pull together how its weirdness, its flaws, its ideas all speak to these core AI debates.
Okay, so wrapping up, we've seen how this film, yeah, it's low budget, yeah, it's quirky, but it really taps into major sci-fi anxieties. The politics of technology, corporate control over our minds.
Aram the baboon is the ultimate symbol of losing control.
And that ontological shakiness when the digital world starts to fray at the edges.
And those moments, the mother with the soup, the discs turning into flowers, they force that big metaphysical question about simulation. Is it all just ones and zeros, just sensory input? That's the phenomenalist view.
If the computer tells the baboon's brain it sees a forest, then the forest effectively exists for that consciousness. Purely material.
Right, or do those glitches hint at something deeper? A spiritual core, maybe. Like the old Gnostic myths, the idea of a spirit trapped in a flawed material world made by a lesser creator.
In this case, the flawed creator is the corporation running the memory bank.
And the glitches are the imprisoned spirit, consciousness, imagination, memory, trying to break free, proving it can't be totally contained by the material simulation.
Aram's mom showing up is like proof that consciousness is more than just data in this scenario. The system isn't a closed loop.
Which brings us perfectly to our final provocative thought. This connects the film's critique right back to modern AI development.
Okay, let's hear it.
The sources mention Regal Gum again, from Dick's time out of joint. He wants that safe, predictable 1950s world. And when the military builds it for him based on his desires, what does it reveal itself to be?
A paradise of consumer capitalism.
Exactly. He looks at a supermarket, this symbol of endless choice and safety.
And he thinks a big store is a complete world in itself. So there's nothing to fear.
Chilling, right? So the question for us today is, what happens when we program our AI systems, which we're doing right now, to create a better world, to optimize our experience, based primarily on our desires for comfort, safety, and endless consumer choice?
Are we just building the ultimate, most perfectly simulated supermarket? Is the real AI dystopia not some iron-fisted tyranny, but just endless, personalized, bland comfort, a perfectly frictionless consumer paradise that pacifies us completely.
And maybe this weird low-budget 1984 Canadian film born from economic struggle and dodgy effects actually gave us a really potent warning about exactly that, the danger of the perfectly constructed, corporate-approved simulacrum of happiness.
Wow, something to definitely chew on. A fantastic deep dive.
It was fun. It's a strange one, but worth revisiting.
See you on next episode. If you enjoyed the episode, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment. See you next week, Cinephiles. Bye-bye.